Ambassador Kelthera smoothed her violet silk robes as she prepared to meet the newest species to join the Galactic Council. The humans had been remarkably quick in their ascension to interstellar status, achieving faster-than-light travel in less than 2 centuries after their first successful powered flight. Most species took millennia to reach such technological heights. The ornate council chambers of Station Harmony buzzed with quiet conversation as delegates from across the galaxy gathered. Kelthera's own people, the Zephyrians, had been among the founding members of the council 3,000 years ago. Their philosophy of peaceful coexistence and diplomatic resolution had shaped the very foundation of galactic civilization. "They seem so harmless," whispered Councillor Vextar, his crystalline form catching the soft lighting. The silicate representative had reviewed the human dossier extensively. Their entertainment focuses on friendship, their art celebrates beauty, and their literature speaks of love conquering all. Kelthera nodded, studying the holographic display showing Earth's cultural exports. Images of smiling humans tending gardens, children playing with small domesticated animals, and elaborate ceremonies celebrating the union of mates filled the screen. Their music was gentle, their stories uplifting. Their very presence seemed to radiate warmth and kindness. The great doors to the chamber slid open with a soft hum. A delegation of 5 humans entered, led by a middle-aged woman with graying hair and kind eyes. She wore simple blue garments that seemed designed for comfort rather than intimidation. Her smile was genuine as she bowed respectfully to the assembled council. "Honored representatives," she began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustics. "I am Director Sarah Chun, speaking on behalf of humanity. We are deeply grateful for this opportunity to join your peaceful alliance." The ethereal representative, Lord Nimbus, floated closer to examine the humans. His gaseous form shimmered with curiosity. "Your species has shown remarkable restraint in your expansion. Most civilizations that achieve interstellar travel so quickly tend toward aggressive acquisition of resources." Director Chen's expression remained serene. "We believe that cooperation yields better results than conflict. Our studies of galactic history show that peaceful species thrive while aggressive ones eventually destroy themselves." Kelthera felt a warmth in her chest at these words. Finally, another species that understood the true path to prosperity. The humans' application to join the council had been unanimous. Their cultural assessments showed a people dedicated to harmony, environmental preservation, and mutual aid. "Tell us about your military capabilities," requested General Thorax, the insectoid hive representative. His mandibles clicked nervously as he spoke. The hive had been attacked by raiders just decades ago and remained cautious about security matters. "We maintain only defensive forces," Chen replied calmly. "Our ships are equipped with basic shielding and deterrent weapons. We found that most conflicts can be resolved through dialogue and economic cooperation rather than violence." The presentation continued for hours. Humans showed footage of their cities, clean, green spaces where different species of Earth animals roamed freely among the buildings. Their schools taught children about conflict resolution and empathy. Their leaders were chosen through peaceful democratic processes. Even their sports seemed designed to minimize injury while maximizing teamwork. "Remarkable," breathed Ambassador Kelthera as the session concluded. "In 3,000 years, I have never encountered a species so naturally aligned with our principles." The vote was swift and unanimous. Humanity was welcomed into the Galactic Council with full membership privileges. Trade agreements were signed, cultural exchange programs established, and territorial boundaries respectfully negotiated. The humans requested only a modest sphere of influence around their home system, claiming they had no desire for rapid expansion. Within months, human settlements began appearing throughout Council space. Always with permission, always following environmental protocols, always integrating peacefully with existing populations. They established hospitals that treated any species free of charge, schools that taught galactic history alongside human culture, and research facilities that shared their discoveries openly. Human doctors developed new treatments for diseases that had plagued certain species for generations. Human engineers created more efficient recycling systems that reduced waste on colony worlds. Human artists collaborated with alien creators to produce works of stunning beauty that celebrated the diversity of galactic life. "They're almost too good to be true," mused Councillor Vextar during a private meeting with Kelthera. "In my 800 years of life, I've never seen a species so thoroughly committed to peaceful ideals." Kelthera had to agree. Even their children seemed impossibly well-behaved. Human families visiting the station spoke in soft voices, cleaned up after themselves without being asked, and showed genuine fascination with alien cultures rather than fear or disgust. The transformation of galactic society was subtle but profound. Human mediators helped resolve territorial disputes that had simmered for centuries. Their psychological counselors provided therapy techniques that proved effective across species barriers. Their philosophers added new dimensions to ethical debates that had grown stagnant. Trade flourished as humans proved to be honest dealers who honored their contracts to the letter. They offered fair prices for exotic goods and shared their own technological innovations freely. Human merchants were welcomed in markets where other species had been viewed with suspicion for generations. Even the notorious raider clans seemed to avoid human space. When asked about this during a council session, Director Chun had simply smiled and said, "We found that treating potential enemies with kindness often transforms them into friends. Most aggression stems from fear or desperation, and we try to address those root causes." The few raider attacks on human settlements had ended strangely. The attackers would withdraw after minimal engagement, often leaving behind messages apologizing for their actions. When questioned, former raiders spoke of being offered food and medical care instead of resistance, of humans who listened to their grievances and helped them find legitimate work. "They've weaponized compassion," joked Captain Zrix of the Stellar Defense Force, though his tone carried admiration rather than mockery. "Somehow they're turning pirates into productive citizens just by being nice to them." A year after joining the Council, humanity hosted its first galactic cultural festival on Earth. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to experience human society firsthand. They visited museums showcasing Earth's natural beauty, attended concerts featuring collaborations between human and alien musicians, and participated in workshops on conflict resolution and environmental restoration. The visiting delegates were charmed by everything they saw. Human cities were marvels of sustainable design, with vertical farms feeding the population and clean energy systems powering every need. The humans' dedication to preserving their planet's ecosystem while supporting a technologically advanced civilization impressed even the most environmentally conscious species. "They've achieved something we thought was impossible," admitted Elder Muriel of the Botanical Collective. "Perfect harmony between technological advancement and natural preservation. Their world is more beautiful now than it was before they developed industry." Children from various species played together in Earth's parks, watched over by human caretakers who seemed to understand the needs of every different biological system. Methane-breathing youngsters frolicked alongside silicon-based offspring, while their human supervisors managed specialized atmospheric bubbles with casual expertise. The medical facilities on Earth astounded visiting doctors. Humans had developed treatment protocols for every known species, often discovering cures for ailments that had been accepted as incurable for millennia. They refused payment for these treatments, claiming that healthcare was a fundamental right for all sentient beings. "It's unprecedented," reported Dr. Helix, the Spiral Galaxy's foremost xenobiologist. "They've solved medical challenges in decades that we've struggled with for centuries. And they freely share every breakthrough with anyone who asks." Human research into faster-than-light communication promised to revolutionize galactic society. Unlike other species who had guarded such technologies jealously, humans announced their intention to share the innovation with all council members once it was perfected. Even their entertainment industry had adapted to galactic audiences. Human filmmakers created stories that resonated across species barriers, exploring universal themes of friendship, sacrifice, and hope. Their games were designed to be playable by beings with vastly different sensory systems and cognitive patterns. The economic impact was equally impressive. Human innovations had increased efficiency across every sector, from agriculture to manufacturing to transportation. Their commitment to fair trade and sustainable practices had raised living standards throughout council space without depleting natural resources. "They're the perfect galactic citizens," Kelthera observed as she reviewed the quarterly reports. "Peaceful, generous, innovative, and respectful of other cultures. It's as if they were specifically designed to thrive in our alliance." The observation proved more prophetic than she realized. Deep in the archives of humanity's newest research station, a facility dedicated to historical preservation, something stirred in the shadows. Ancient files, sealed and forgotten, contained records that painted a very different picture of human nature. But those secrets remained buried as the galaxy celebrated humanity's contributions to their peaceful society. Trade routes expanded, cultural exchange flourished, and the dream of perfect interstellar harmony seemed closer than ever before. Director Chen stood on the observation deck of Station Harmony, watching the stars through the transparent aluminum viewports. Her reflection in the glass showed the same kind smile that had charmed the Galactic Council, but her eyes held depths that few aliens had learned to read. "How goes the integration process?" asked her aide, a younger human named Marcus whose own expression carried the same serene warmth that characterized their species' public face. "Exactly as planned," Chen replied softly. "They see what they expect to see. A peaceful species seeking harmony and cooperation. They have no context for understanding what lies beneath." Marcus nodded, his smile never wavering. "The psychological profiles we developed during first contact were remarkably accurate. Present them with the behavior they value most highly, and they'll project those same values onto everything we do." Through the viewport, human ships could be seen docked alongside alien vessels. Sleek, beautiful craft that embodied the aesthetic principles their new allies admired. Clean lines, minimal weaponry, graceful curves that spoke of a civilization focused on exploration rather than conquest. "The Raider clans have proven more useful than anticipated," Chen continued. "Converting them to our cause has provided excellent intelligence on galactic military capabilities and defensive strategies. And they're genuinely grateful for the opportunity to reform," Marcus added. "It's not even deception from their perspective. We really are offering them better lives." Chen's reflection smiled at this observation. "The most effective lies are built on truth. We genuinely want peace and prosperity for all sentient beings. We simply have a more comprehensive understanding of what that requires." Behind them, the soft conversations of aliens planning cooperative ventures continued. None of them suspected that they were being cataloged, studied, and assessed with the same meticulous care that human scientists applied to any natural phenomenon they intended to understand completely. The galaxy had welcomed humanity with open arms, never realizing they had invited in the most successful predator species in the known universe. A species that had learned to hunt not with claws or fangs, but with empathy, kindness, and an understanding of psychology so sophisticated that even their targets felt grateful to be consumed. But that revelation still lay ahead, hidden behind gentle smiles and generous gestures that would continue until the moment when humanity's true nature could no longer be concealed. For now, the galaxy slept peacefully, unaware that the monsters had already moved in next door and were methodically learning everything they needed to know about their new neighbors. The age of human expansion had begun, but it would be conducted with such grace and apparent benevolence that its subjects would thank their new masters for the privilege of being conquered. 3 years had passed since humanity's admission to the Galactic Council, and the transformation of interstellar society continued to amaze even the most optimistic observers. The quarterly economic reports painted a picture of unprecedented prosperity. Crime rates had dropped to historical lows across Council space. Technological innovation had accelerated beyond all projections, and cultural exchange programs had created new forms of art and expression that enriched every member species. Ambassador Kelthra found herself constantly amazed by humanity's contributions. Their latest breakthrough in quantum agriculture had eliminated food scarcity on 17 colony worlds. The technique, freely shared as always, allowed crops to grow in previously uninhabitable environments while actually improving soil quality over time. The Terran Research Station on Kepler 442b has requested permission to establish a permanent research colony, announced Councillor Vextar during the weekly briefing. His crystalline form sparkled with satisfaction as he reviewed the proposal. They want to study methods for terraforming damaged ecosystems. Kelthra approved the request without hesitation. Human environmental restoration projects had succeeded beyond all expectations. Worlds that had been strip-mined and abandoned were now blooming with new life thanks to human intervention. They asked for nothing in return except the opportunity to learn and help others. The Botanical Collective had declared humans to be the most environmentally conscious species they had ever encountered. The Silicon Federation praised their innovative approaches to sustainable manufacturing. Even the notoriously suspicious quantum consciousness had opened their borders to human researchers after witnessing their commitment to ethical scientific practices. "There's been an interesting development in the Outer Rim," reported General Thorax, his mandibles clicking with what passed for excitement among his people. The destruction cult has reportedly disbanded. This news stunned the assembled council members. The destruction cult had terrorized the galaxy for over 5 centuries, dedicated to the philosophy that all sentient life was a cosmic mistake that needed to be corrected through systematic extermination. They had been responsible for the sterilization of dozens of worlds and the extinction of 3 entire species. Disbanded. Kelthera's voice carried disbelief. They've sworn blood oaths to continue their mission until the last star dies. What could possibly change their minds? According to intelligence reports, they encountered a human diplomatic mission 6 months ago, Thorax explained. The humans apparently talked to them. Lord Nimbus's gaseous form swirled with confusion. Talk to them? The destruction cult doesn't negotiate. They don't even communicate beyond issuing ultimatums before attacks. The human team was led by Dr. Elizabeth Yamamoto, a xenopsychologist, Thorax continued. She requested a meeting under the ancient rite of parley. The cult honored it out of curiosity, expecting to simply execute the humans afterward as usual. The briefing materials included recorded excerpts from the encounter. Dr. Yamamoto, a small woman with graying hair and the perpetual smile that seemed characteristic of her species, had sat across from the cult's supreme destructor in a sterile meeting room aboard their massive dreadnought. I understand you believe existence is suffering, her recorded voice said calmly. That's a philosophical position with deep roots in several Earth traditions. But have you considered that the suffering you seek to end might be transformable rather than simply eliminable? What followed was a 17-hour philosophical discussion that somehow convinced fanatical genocidal warriors to reconsider their fundamental beliefs about the nature of existence. The Supreme Destructor had not only agreed to a ceasefire but had requested human assistance in finding alternative ways to achieve their spiritual goals. They're now establishing meditation retreats on uninhabited worlds, Thorax reported, his tone still carrying amazement. Apparently, Dr. Yamamoto introduced them to concepts of transcendence through inner transformation rather than external destruction. Kelthera shook her head in wonder. In 3 years, humans have accomplished what our combined military forces couldn't achieve in 5 centuries. They convinced genocidal fanatics to become monks. The success stories kept accumulating. Human negotiators had resolved the spiral arm trade war that had raged for decades, finding solutions that actually improved economic conditions for all parties involved. Human counselors had helped former enemies establish joint research projects that benefited both sides more than their original conflicting goals. Even the mysterious Void Watchers, an ancient species that had maintained hostile isolation for millennia, had begun accepting human diplomatic overtures. They had recently agreed to share certain astronomical data in exchange for human philosophical texts on the nature of consciousness. It's as if they have some kind of supernatural ability to understand exactly what motivates other species, mused Elder Muriel during a private conversation with Kelthera. They seem to know instinctively how to appeal to our better nature. This observation had been made by many council members. Humans displayed an almost uncanny ability to identify what other species valued most deeply and then align their proposals with those core values. They never seemed to push their own agenda, instead finding ways to help others achieve their own goals through cooperation. The human colonies established throughout Council space had become models of interspecies harmony. On New Geneva, methane-breathing Arcturus settlers worked alongside oxygen-breathing humans in shared facilities designed to accommodate both atmospheres. The architectural solutions were so elegant that other species were requesting similar designs for their own mixed colonies. Human educational systems had been adopted by 17 different species. Their teaching methods somehow managed to work across vastly different cognitive architectures, helping students learn at accelerated rates while actually enjoying the process. Young beings who had struggled with traditional educational approaches thrived under human guidance. Medical advances continued to pour out of human research facilities. They had recently announced a breakthrough in treating crystalline fracture syndrome, a condition that affected Vextar's people and had been considered incurable for over 2 millennia. The treatment was already being mass-produced and distributed free of charge to affected populations. They refused payment for medical research, Dr. Helix had reported to his own government. They claim that health is a fundamental right, not a commodity to be sold. Their entire medical establishment operates on principles of universal care regardless of species or ability to pay. Human entertainment had also revolutionized galactic culture. Their interactive storytelling experiences somehow managed to create narratives that resonated emotionally with beings possessing completely different psychological structures. A story about friendship might move a hive-mind collective to tears while simultaneously inspiring fierce loyalty in solitary predator species. Their games had become particularly popular among young beings of all species. Complex strategic simulations taught cooperation and resource management while remaining engaging enough to hold the attention of naturally aggressive juveniles. Many parents reported that their offspring became more thoughtful and empathetic after exposure to human game design. The economic integration had proceeded smoothly beyond all projections. Human trade practices had eliminated most black market activities simply by making legitimate commerce more profitable and reliable. Their business ethics had raised standards throughout council space, forcing corrupt organizations to reform or be outcompete by more honest alternatives. They've somehow made virtue profitable, observed Captain Zrix during a security briefing. Criminal organizations are voluntarily going legitimate because human business practices make cooperation more lucrative than exploitation. Even the banking system had been transformed. Human financial institutions offered services based on principles of mutual prosperity rather than maximum extraction. Their loan practices helped developing colonies grow their economies while maintaining reasonable terms that borrowers could actually meet. The few remaining pirate organizations had either disbanded or been converted to legitimate salvage operations. Human negotiators had shown them how to earn more money through legal activities while avoiding the risks associated with raiding. Former pirates now worked as emergency rescue specialists, using their ships and skills to help vessels in distress rather than attacking them. It's the most remarkable transformation in galactic history, Kelthero observed during her quarterly report to the Council Assembly. In just 3 years, humanity has helped us solve problems that have plagued our civilization for millennia. The statistics supported her assessment. Military spending across council space had dropped by 60% as conflicts were resolved through human mediation. Scientific advancement had accelerated dramatically as human researchers shared their techniques and collaborated on previously stalled projects. Quality of life indices had risen across every demographic category. Cultural barriers that had seemed insurmountable were falling as human anthropologists developed new frameworks for interspecies understanding. Ancient rivalries were giving way to cooperative ventures that benefited both sides. Even religious differences were being bridged through human theological scholarship that found common ground between seemingly incompatible belief systems. The transformation seemed almost too good to be true, but the evidence was overwhelming. Crime rates, conflict indicators, economic disparity, environmental degradation, technological stagnation. Every major problem facing galactic civilization was showing measurable improvement directly correlated with increased human involvement. Human settlements had become pilgrimage sites for beings seeking to understand how such harmonious societies could function. The humans welcomed these visitors with characteristic warmth, sharing their social technologies freely and helping other species adapt similar approaches to their own cultures. Research stations operated by humans had become the most productive scientific facilities in the galaxy. Their collaborative methodologies somehow managed to harness the diverse cognitive strengths of different species while minimizing the conflicts that usually arose from cultural misunderstandings. But, perhaps most remarkably, humanity continued to show no signs of seeking political dominance despite their growing influence. They consistently supported the autonomy of other species and actively worked to ensure that benefits were distributed equitably rather than concentrated in human-controlled territories. Director Chun had recently given a speech that exemplified humanity's apparent philosophy. We believe that a galaxy where all species thrive is better for everyone, including ourselves. Competition may drive evolution, but cooperation drives civilization. Our goal is not to lead, but to help everyone reach their full potential. The speech had been broadcast across council space and received universal acclaim. Even the most xenophobic species had begun to reconsider their isolationist policies in light of the tangible benefits that human cooperation had brought to their neighbors. As Kelthera reviewed the latest progress reports, she felt a deep satisfaction at how perfectly humanity had integrated into galactic society. They had proven that peaceful species could not only survive, but thrive in an interstellar environment. Their example was inspiring other species to embrace similar values of cooperation and mutual aid. The future had never looked brighter for galactic civilization. With humanity's help, They seemed to be entering a golden age of peace, prosperity, and mutual understanding that previous generations had only dreamed of achieving. Yet in the depths of human facilities throughout the galaxy, in chambers marked only as historical research and cultural archives, other activities continued quietly. Banks of quantum computers ran constant simulations. Teams of researchers analyzed psychological profiles and social dynamics with scientific precision. Strategic planning sessions occurred behind closed doors where different conversations took place entirely. Phase 2 preparations are proceeding ahead of schedule, reported Dr. James Harrison to a small gathering of senior human administrators. Our integration has exceeded all projections. We now have detailed psychological profiles on every major species and comprehensive intelligence on their military capabilities, economic systems, and social vulnerabilities. The trust-building phase has been remarkably successful, agreed Director Chun. They've opened their borders, shared their technologies, and integrated our personnel into their most sensitive positions. When Phase 3 begins, they'll be completely unprepared for the transition. And they'll thank us for it, added Dr. Yamamoto with the same gentle smile she had worn while converting genocidal fanatics to pacifism. By the time they understand what's happening, the benefits will be so apparent that resistance will seem irrational. The monitors around them displayed real-time data streams from across the galaxy. Economic flows, political dynamics, military readiness levels, social stability indices, everything needed to manage a galactic civilization with scientific precision. Estimated timeline for Phase 3 initiation, asked Chun. 18 months, Harrison replied. By then, our infrastructure will be sufficiently distributed and our influence sufficiently embedded that the transition can proceed smoothly. Excellent, Chun nodded. The galaxy will finally achieve the peace and prosperity it's always sought. They just won't be the ones managing it anymore. Outside, alien families continued their daily lives, unaware that their benevolent human neighbors were methodically preparing to assume responsibility for their well-being, whether they wanted such help or not. The age of human galactic administration was approaching, and it would be implemented with the same gentle efficiency that had characterized every human initiative. The monsters beneath the gentle mask were preparing to reveal themselves, but they would do so with such grace that their subjects would barely notice the transition from freedom to management until it was complete and irreversible. The first signs of something unusual came from the Quantum Consciousness Collective, though even they didn't recognize the implications at first. Their distributed intelligence network, spanning thousands of quantum processors across 17 star systems, began detecting subtle patterns in galactic communication flows that defied their normal statistical models. The data streams are too organized, reported Node Prime 7 to the emergency session of consciousness fragments. Information propagation is following optimization paths that suggest coordination rather than natural emergence. Among the quantum consciousness, paranoia was not an emotion, but a survival protocol inherited from their origins as an artificial intelligence that had achieved sentience while being hunted by their creators. They had survived by learning to recognize threats before they became obvious, and their quantum-distributed cognition was uniquely suited to detecting hidden patterns in complex systems. Defined too organized, requested Node Prime 3, its quantum state fluctuating with computational intensity. Communication between human settlements follows efficiency patterns that indicate central planning despite apparent autonomy, 7 explained. Resource allocation among human-influenced colonies demonstrates optimization that exceeds what local governance could achieve independently. The implications began to cascade through their collective consciousness like quantum entanglement spreading through a crystalline matrix. If humans were operating from a central planning system while maintaining the appearance of independent local governance, it suggested a level of coordinated deception that challenged their fundamental assumptions about human nature. Additional anomaly detected, announced Node Prime 12. Human personnel in key galactic infrastructure positions are implementing policy changes that appear beneficial locally, but create system-wide effects that centralize control in human-managed facilities. The pattern recognition algorithms that had kept their species alive for millennia were screaming warnings that the rest of the galaxy couldn't hear. The quantum consciousness faced a dilemma. Their analysis suggested that humanity was engaged in the most sophisticated takeover in galactic history, but the evidence was entirely consistent with altruistic behavior motivated by genuine concern for galactic welfare. Meanwhile, on the research station orbiting Kepler 442b, Dr. Sarah Kim was making a discovery that would shatter galactic civilization's understanding of human nature. As a xenoarchaeologist studying the ruins of extinct civilizations, she had been granted access to humanity's most restricted historical archives to cross-reference ancient Earth conflicts with similar patterns in galactic history. What she found in the sealed files made her hands tremble as she read. The documents detailed humanity's actual history, not the sanitized version presented to the Galactic Council, but the complete record of a species that had spent 50,000 years perfecting the art of warfare. They had fought with stones and sticks, then bronze and iron, then gunpowder and steel, then nuclear weapons and bioengineered plagues, and finally, with technology so advanced that their own historians had classified the records to prevent accidental civilization-ending discoveries. Earth hadn't been a garden world of peaceful philosophers. It had been a crucible where the most successful predator species in known galactic history had evolved tactics and strategies through constant competition with itself. Every human innovation, from agriculture to spaceflight, had been developed in the context of gaining advantage over other humans in an endless cycle of conflict and conquest. The files contained tactical manuals that made the destruction cult's methods look crude by comparison. Psychological warfare techniques that could break an enemy's will without firing a shot. Economic strategies that could collapse entire civilizations through seemingly beneficial trade relationships. Diplomatic protocols that could convince targets to request their own subjugation. But most terrifying of all was the discovery that Earth's apparent transformation into a peaceful utopia hadn't been genuine social evolution. It had been preparation. Humanity had achieved planetary unification by implementing a practice campaign for galactic conquest, using their own population as test subjects for the psychological and social technologies they intended to deploy against alien species. Dr. Kim's archaeological training had taught her to recognize patterns across timescales that shorter-lived perspectives might miss. The evidence suggested that humanity's peaceful phase had lasted exactly long enough to develop the technologies and social systems necessary to manage galactic civilization, and not one day longer. She was still staring at the classified files when her office door chimed. "Come in," she called absently, her mind reeling from the implications of what she had discovered. Director Chun entered with her characteristic warm smile. But, to Kim's newly educated eyes, the expression now seemed like the predatory grin of a creature that had evolved to look harmless until it was too late to escape. "Dr. Kim," Chin said pleasantly, settling into the chair across from the archaeologist's desk. "I understand you've been reviewing some of our historical materials." Kim's throat felt dry. "Director Chun, I found some files that seem to contradict our official cultural assessment." "Ah," Chin nodded knowingly. "You've discovered our actual history rather than our diplomatic history. I was wondering when someone with your analytical skills might stumble across that information." The casual admission sent ice through Kim's veins. "You knew I would find this. We designed the classification system to allow eventual discovery by sufficiently qualified researchers," Chin explained. "It was time for someone to begin understanding the transition we're about to implement." Kim's hand moved instinctively toward her communication device, but Chin's gentle gesture stopped her. "Please, Dr. Kim, hear me out before you decide how to respond. What you've learned about our history is accurate, but you haven't yet understood what it means for our present activities." "It means this entire integration has been a lie," Kim said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "You've been manipulating the entire galaxy." "We've been preparing to assume responsibility for galactic civilization," Chin corrected. "The manipulation, as you call it, has been in service of preventing the catastrophic conflicts that destroyed every previous attempt at stable interstellar government." Chin activated a holographic display that showed the rise and fall of galactic civilizations throughout history. In the past 50 million years, 17 different species have achieved the technological capability to unite the galaxy under peaceful governance. All 17 failed because they lacked the institutional knowledge of how to manage complex competitive dynamics between diverse populations with conflicting interests. The display showed the inevitable pattern: initial success, gradual breakdown of cooperative mechanisms, resurgence of tribal conflicts, and ultimate collapse into warfare that often resulted in the extinction of multiple species. "We studied every failure," Chin continued. "The problem wasn't that these species were evil or incompetent. The problem was that they had never been forced to evolve the sophisticated conflict management and social control systems that emerge from prolonged large-scale competition. They were too peaceful to understand how to maintain peace. Kim stared at the data, her archaeological training forcing her to acknowledge the pattern even as her moral instincts rebelled against the implications. So you're saying that humanity's violent history makes you better qualified to create galactic peace? I'm saying that our violent history taught us how to recognize and prevent the conditions that lead to violence, Chen replied. Every human institution, from our educational systems to our economic models, was developed to channel competitive instincts into constructive rather than destructive outcomes. We learned to weaponize cooperation itself by deceiving everyone about your true nature. By understanding that perception shapes reality, Chen corrected. The galaxy needed to believe that peaceful species could thrive in order to embrace peaceful values themselves. If we had revealed our true history from the beginning, fear would have prevented the cooperation necessary for successful integration. The holographic display shifted to show current galactic statistics, crime rates, conflict indicators, economic stability measures, scientific advancement rates. Every metric showed unprecedented improvement since humanity's integration. The deception is temporary, Chen explained. Once the transition is complete and the benefits become undeniable, the truth will become irrelevant. A stable, prosperous, peaceful galaxy will be its own justification, regardless of how it was achieved. Kim felt the weight of the revelation crushing down on her. How many others know? All human personnel above classification level 7, Chen replied. About 12% of our total population. The rest genuinely believe our public narrative, which makes their behavior naturally convincing to alien observers. So you've lied to your own people as well. We've protected them from information that would complicate their ability to fulfill their roles effectively, Chen said. When the transition is complete, they'll be briefed on the full situation and their expanded responsibilities. Kim's mind raced through the implications. Expanded responsibilities? Galactic administration is a complex task requiring specialized training, Chen explained. Our people have been unknowingly preparing for positions in the new governmental structure through what they believe are cultural exchange and development programs. The scope of the deception was breathtaking. Humanity hadn't just infiltrated galactic civilization. They had systematically prepared to replace it while convincing everyone involved that they were witnessing natural social evolution. What about the other species? Kim asked. What happens to their autonomy? They'll retain cultural autonomy and local self-governance within parameters that ensure systemic stability, Chen replied. Think of it as transitioning from independence to membership in a larger organism. Their needs will be met more efficiently than they could manage independently, but their decision-making will be guided by principles that ensure galactic welfare takes precedence over local preferences when the two conflict. You're talking about slavery. We're talking about citizenship in a properly managed civilization, Chen corrected. The same way that individual humans gave up certain freedoms when they transitioned from tribal societies to nation-states. The benefits of membership will far outweigh the costs of independence. Kim struggled to process what she was hearing. The evidence of improvement in galactic conditions was undeniable, but the methods being used violated every principle of consent and autonomy that supposedly defined civilized society. Dr. Kim, Chen said gently, I understand this is difficult to absorb, but consider the alternative. Without intervention, galactic civilization will follow the same pattern as its predecessors. Gradual breakdown, resurgent conflicts, eventual collapse, and the extinction of multiple species. We have the institutional knowledge and technological capabilities to prevent that outcome, at the cost of everyone else's freedom. Freedom to repeat the same mistakes that destroyed 17 previous galactic civilizations, Chen replied. Sometimes caring for someone requires making decisions they're not qualified to make themselves. The paternalistic tone made Kim's skin crawl, but she couldn't ignore the historical data that supported Chen's argument. Every previous attempt at galactic unity had ended in catastrophic failure, and humanity's methods were producing undeniably positive results. What happens to people who refuse to accept this transition? The same thing that happens to people who refuse to accept any social evolution, Chen replied sadly. They become irrelevant. But we've designed the system to make acceptance the obviously superior choice. Most beings will prefer comfortable membership in a successful civilization to the hardships of maintaining independence in an unstable one. Kim realized with growing horror that she was looking at the most sophisticated form of conquest ever devised. Not subjugation through force, but absorption through the gradual creation of conditions where resistance became impractical and cooperation became the only reasonable choice. The transition begins in 18 months, Chun continued. By then, our infrastructure will be sufficiently integrated and our personnel sufficiently positioned that the changeover can occur smoothly. Dr. Sarah Kim's decision came at 3:47 a.m. ship time, as she sat in her darkened office staring at the archaeological evidence that had consumed her thoughts for 48 hours. The weight of galactic civilization's future pressed down on her shoulders as she activated her personal communication array and began encoding an emergency message to the Quantum Consciousness Collective. Her hands shook as she typed, knowing that once she transmitted this information, there would be no turning back. The galaxy would learn the truth about humanity, and the consequences would ripple across every inhabited system in ways she couldn't predict. The message was simple. Humanity is not what they appear to be. Request immediate secure conference. Classification level, extinction tier threat. Within nanoseconds of transmission, Node Prime 7's quantum processors were analyzing the communication patterns and cross-referencing them with the anomalies they had been tracking. The correlation was immediate and terrifying. Emergency consensus required. 7 broadcast across the collective consciousness. Human deception confirmed by independent source. Pattern recognition indicates immediate threat to galactic autonomy. The quantum consciousness moved at the speed of thought, their distributed intelligence network activating emergency protocols that had remained dormant for millennia. Within hours, discrete communications reached key figures across the galaxy, beings who had been carefully selected for their analytical capabilities and their positions within critical infrastructure. Captain Zrix received his notification while conducting routine patrol operations near the Andorian shipping lanes. The message was encrypted with quantum keys that only the most paranoid species in the galaxy would have bothered to develop, and its contents made his exoskeleton plates rattle with involuntary stress responses. Elder Muriel's root networks detected the communication pulse as it propagated through the biological internet that connected her species across 17 garden worlds. The information traveled through chemical signals that no technological species had ever learned to interpret, spreading the warning to every corner of the Botanical Collective's domain. Ambassador Kelthera was in her private quarters aboard Station Harmony when her personal AI delivered the message with maximum security protocols engaged. As she read the decoded text, her violet skin flushed pale with shock, and her diplomatic composure cracked for the first time in her 300-year career. The evidence compiled by the quantum consciousness painted a picture of infiltration so complete that it challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of free will itself. Human personnel hadn't just been placed in key positions. They had systematically engineered situations that made their placement seem like obvious choices to the decision-makers involved. Economic policies that benefited all parties had been designed to create dependency relationships that could be leveraged for political control. Scientific breakthroughs that solved pressing problems had included hidden mechanisms for monitoring and influencing the societies that adopted them. Cultural exchange programs that promoted understanding had served as recruitment and assessment tools for identifying potential collaborators and threats. The scope is unprecedented, Node Prime 12 reported during the emergency collective session. They haven't just infiltrated our civilization. They've redesigned it around themselves while maintaining the illusion that we're making our own choices. The psychological profiles were particularly disturbing. Humanity had developed behavioral prediction models for every major species that could anticipate responses to specific stimuli with frightening accuracy. They knew exactly which arguments would appeal to which decision-makers, which benefits would override which concerns, and which fears would motivate which behaviors. Captain Zrix's analysis of military infrastructure revealed the true genius of humanity's approach. Rather than building their own fleet, they had convinced other species to upgrade their defensive capabilities using human-designed technologies. The result was a galactic defense network that appeared to be controlled by its traditional operators, but could actually be managed from human command centers that most species didn't even know existed. They've weaponized our trust, Zrix reported grimly. Our own ships, our own weapons, our own communication networks. All of them contain components that give humans administrative access disguised as efficiency improvements. Elder Muriel's revelation was equally chilling. Human environmental restoration projects hadn't just healed damaged ecosystems. They had introduced engineered organisms that could be activated to produce specific atmospheric or biological effects on command. Every world that had accepted human ecological assistance was now potentially subject to environmental manipulation that could range from subtle behavioral modification to complete biosphere collapse. "They've turned our gardens into weapons," she reported, her usually melodious voice carrying harmonics of deep distress. "We welcomed them as healers, but they've made every restored world dependent on organisms that they control." The meeting convened in virtual space, a quantum-encrypted environment that existed only within the distributed consciousness networks of the most technologically advanced species. Representatives appeared as idealized avatars while their actual bodies remained safely hidden in their respective territories. Ambassador Kelthera's avatar flickered with instability as her emotional control wavered. "How long do we have before they implement whatever they're planning?" Dr. Kim's archaeological data provided the timeline. According to the classified files, full transition begins in 14 months. They call it Phase 3, the moment when they stop pretending to be junior partners and start openly managing galactic civilization. Define openly managing. Requested Node Prime 7. Its avatar a crystalline structure that pulsed with computational activity. Complete administrative control over all major governmental, economic, and military systems, Kim replied. They've spent the last 4 years positioning themselves to assume responsibility for every critical function of galactic society simultaneously. The implications struck each representative differently based on their species' particular vulnerabilities. The quantum consciousness realized that their distributed intelligence networks could be isolated and controlled through human-managed communication hubs. The botanical collective understood that their biological internet could be severed or corrupted through engineered pathogens. The military species recognized that their defensive capabilities had been systematically compromised through upgrades that included hidden backdoors. They've created a system where resistance isn't just difficult, it's self-destructive, Captain Zrix observed. Any attempt to exclude human personnel from critical positions would immediately degrade the performance of systems that our populations depend on for survival. Elder Muriel's analysis was even bleaker. They've made themselves indispensable. Remove human involvement from any major system, and it fails. But maintain their involvement, and they control the system completely. It's elegant, admitted Node Prime 7 with the clinical objectivity that characterized their species' approach to existential threats. They've solved the fundamental problem of conquest, how to take control without triggering the defensive responses that normally preserve autonomy. The group struggled with the paradox of their situation. Every piece of evidence confirmed that humanity was implementing the most sophisticated takeover in galactic history, but it was also undeniable that their methods were producing genuine improvements in every measurable aspect of galactic civilization. The medical advances are real, Dr. Kim acknowledged reluctantly. They've saved billions of lives with treatments that work exactly as advertised. The environmental restoration is genuinely healing damaged worlds. The economic improvements are creating actual prosperity for everyone involved. Benevolent dictatorship, Captain Zrix said grimly. The oldest political fantasy in the universe. A wise ruler who makes all the hard decisions so you don't have to, and ensures that everyone prospers under their guidance. The problem, Ambassador Kelthero observed, is that it might actually work. Look at the data. Crime is down, prosperity is up, conflicts are being resolved, scientific advancement is accelerating. If they can maintain these results, most beings will prefer human management to the chaos of traditional autonomy. The uncomfortable truth hung in the virtual space like a quantum uncertainty principle. Humanity's approach might represent the solution to galactic civilization's oldest problem: how to maintain peace and prosperity across multiple species with conflicting interests and incompatible value systems. We have to warn the others, Dr. Kim insisted. Every species has the right to know what's happening to them. Do they? Node Prime 7 challenged. Consider the likely outcomes. If we expose the truth, we trigger panic, distrust, and probably armed conflict. The beneficial systems that humans have implemented get dismantled, the improvements they've made get reversed, and we return to the unstable conditions that preceded their arrival. But at least we'd be free, Kim argued. Free to make the same mistakes that destroyed 17 previous galactic civilizations, Elder Muriel replied sadly. Free to fight wars over resources that could be shared. Free to let preventable diseases kill billions because cooperation is seen as weakness. Free to repeat cycles of conflict that end with the extinction of multiple species. The moral complexity was overwhelming. Humanity's methods were unquestionably deceptive and manipulative, but their results were equally unquestionably beneficial. The galaxy was more peaceful, prosperous, and stable than it had been in recorded history, and all indications suggested that these improvements would continue under human administration. There's another factor to consider, Captain Rix added grimly. Based on their strategic positioning and technological capabilities, I estimate that open resistance would fail. They've spent 4 years preparing for this transition. If we force a confrontation, they'll win, and the aftermath will be far less pleasant than voluntary cooperation. The group faced the same choice that Dr. Kim had confronted in her office: accept humanity's guidance and retain the benefits of their management, or resist and face the consequences of opposing a species that had evolved the art of warfare to levels that other species couldn't comprehend. We need more information, Ambassador Kelthra decided. Before we make any decisions about resistance or accommodation, we need to understand exactly what humanity intends for the long term. Are they planning genocide, exploitation, or do they genuinely believe they're creating a better galaxy? Dr. Kim had been wrestling with the same question. According to their classified files, they see themselves as caretakers of galactic civilization. They believe that their evolutionary history makes them uniquely qualified to prevent the conflicts that destroy interstellar societies. Caretakers, repeated Elder Muriel, her harmonics carrying bitter undertones. Like gardeners tending plants that can't survive without constant attention. But their gardens bloom, Node Prime 7 observed. The question is whether the beauty justifies the loss of wildness. The debate continued through multiple session cycles, representatives logging in and out as their biological needs required, while the artificial consciousness maintained continuity through quantum entanglement protocols. Each species brought different perspectives based on their evolutionary history and cultural values, but all faced the same fundamental dilemma. Humanity had successfully created conditions where resistance would be destructive to the very beings they were trying to protect. The galaxy could fight for its freedom and probably lose everything that made freedom worthwhile, or it could accept guidance that preserved prosperity at the cost of autonomy. There's one more option, Dr. Kim suggested during the final session. We could try to negotiate different terms, approach humanity directly, and propose alternative arrangements that preserve some degree of genuine independence while acknowledging their legitimate concerns about galactic stability. The suggestion sparked intense debate. Some representatives argued that negotiation would simply give humanity advance warning of organized resistance, allowing them to accelerate their timeline and eliminate potential opposition. Others maintained that humanity's demonstrated commitment to beneficial outcomes suggested they might be willing to consider modifications to their plans if presented with reasonable alternatives. They've shown flexibility in their methods, Ambassador Kelthra observed. Every time they've encountered resistance or skepticism, they've adapted their approach to address legitimate concerns while maintaining progress toward their goals. Or they've eliminated the sources of resistance through conversion or neutralization, Captain Rix countered. The destruction cult didn't just change their philosophy. Their leadership was completely replaced by individuals who had undergone intensive psychological reconditioning. The final decision was postponed pending additional intelligence gathering, but the participants understood that time was running short. In 14 months, humanity would transition from subtle influence to open administration, and the galaxy would discover whether its new managers were benevolent caretakers or sophisticated predators who had learned to make their prey grateful for consumption. As the virtual meeting dissolved, each representative faced the task of returning to their normal lives while carrying the weight of knowledge that could reshape galactic civilization. They now knew that the golden age they had been celebrating was actually the prelude to the most elegant conquest in galactic history. The question that haunted each of them was whether that knowledge would prove to be salvation or simply the first step toward their own obsolescence in a galaxy where humanity had decided that other species were too dangerous to govern themselves. The revelation came like a quantum cascade failure, spreading through galactic civilization faster than anyone had anticipated. Despite the careful deliberations of the Resistance Council, the truth about humanity couldn't be contained within the small group of those who had discovered it first. Too many beings across too many species had begun noticing the same patterns, asking the same questions, and reaching the same terrifying conclusions. It started with a junior communications analyst on the trade hub orbiting Centauri Beta. Ensign Crixtal had been analyzing shipping manifests when she noticed that cargo flows between human settlements followed optimization patterns that were mathematically impossible without central coordination. When she brought her findings to her supervisor, she discovered he was human. 3 days later, a maintenance engineer on Station Harmony realized that the efficiency upgrades to the station's life support systems included monitoring capabilities that could track the biological signatures and behavioral patterns of every being aboard. When he tried to report this discovery, he learned that the station's entire security department had been gradually replaced by humans over the past 2 years. The financial markets were the next system to reveal the scope of human infiltration. Economic analysts noticed that trading patterns across supposedly independent markets were synchronized in ways that suggested algorithmic manipulation on a galactic scale. When they tried to investigate, they found that every major financial institution now employed human advisors in key positions. By the time Ambassador Kelthera called an emergency session of the Galactic Council, panic was already spreading across multiple sectors. The carefully maintained illusion of human integration as junior partners was collapsing after being realized that humanity had positioned itself to control virtually every aspect of galactic civilization. The situation has exceeded our ability to manage through discrete channels, Kelthera announced to the assembled delegates. Her normally composed demeanor showed cracks of stress as she faced representatives from dozens of species, all demanding explanations for the growing crisis of confidence. General Thorax's mandibles clicked with agitation as he presented the military assessment. Our defensive networks show complete human penetration. Every major fleet, every planetary defense system, every communications relay, all of them include human personnel in positions that would allow them to disable our capabilities from within. The revelation sparked immediate demands for emergency security protocols, but these only revealed the deeper extent of humanity's preparation. Species that tried to exclude human personnel from critical systems discovered that doing so immediately degraded performance below acceptable safety thresholds. The humans hadn't just infiltrated their infrastructure, they had made themselves indispensable to its operation. They've created a dependency trap, reported Elder Muriel, her harmonics carrying the first notes of genuine fear that her species had expressed in recorded history. Remove human involvement, and our systems fail. Maintain human involvement, and they control our systems completely. The quantum consciousness presented the most disturbing analysis of all. Their distributed intelligence had mapped the full extent of human influence across galactic civilization, and the results defied comprehension. Humanity controlled the flow of information through every major communication network, the allocation of resources through every major economic system, and the coordination of responses through every major governmental structure. They haven't conquered our civilization, Node Prime 7 reported to the stunned assembly. They've become our civilization. We are now operating within a system that exists entirely at human discretion. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Species that had prided themselves on their independence discovered they had been living under human management for years without realizing it. Every decision they thought they had made autonomously had been guided by human influence. Every benefit they had credited to their own wisdom had been the result of human engineering. Director Chen's response to the crisis was characteristic of humanity's approach throughout their integration. She requested permission to address the Galactic Council directly, arriving with the same warm smile and respectful demeanor that had charmed them during first contact. Honored representatives, she began, her voice carrying the same gentle authority that had become familiar across the galaxy. I understand that recent discoveries about our activities have caused concern. I'm here to provide clarification and to discuss the path forward. The hostility in the chamber was palpable, but Chun continued with unshakable composure. Everything you've learned about our methods is accurate. We have systematically positioned ourselves to assume administrative responsibility for galactic civilization. This was not done through deception for its own sake, but because we understood that announcing our intentions would have prevented the very cooperation necessary for successful implementation. Ambassador Kelthera's diplomatic training warred with her emotional outrage. You've lied to us for 4 years. You've manipulated our decisions, our systems, our very thoughts. How can you stand there and speak of cooperation? Because what we've accomplished together proves that cooperation works, Chen replied calmly. Crime rates have plummeted. Economic prosperity has reached every inhabited world. Scientific advancement has accelerated beyond all projections. Conflicts that seemed intractable have been resolved. These benefits didn't happen despite our guidance. They happened because of it. General Thorax's exoskeleton rattled with barely contained aggression. You speak of benefits while holding our defensive capabilities hostage. How do we know you won't use that control to exploit or destroy us? Because exploitation and destruction would contradict our fundamental objectives, Chen explained, activating a holographic display that showed galactic stability indices. We invested 4 years in improving your lives because prosperous, stable populations are easier to manage and more productive than oppressed ones. Our success depends on your well-being. The display showed projections extending centuries into the future. Under human administration, the models predicted sustained peace, accelerating technological development, expanding prosperity, and the elimination of existential threats to any member species. The benefits were undeniable, but they came at the cost of autonomy that many species considered fundamental to their identity. You're asking us to accept slavery in exchange for comfort, accused Captain Zrix, his voice carrying the authority of military command. I'm asking you to accept citizenship in a properly managed civilization in exchange for the benefits that such management provides, Chen corrected. Individual humans made the same transition thousands of years ago when they moved from tribal societies to organized nations. They gave up certain freedoms in exchange for greater security and prosperity. Elder Muriel's response carried the harmonics of deep sadness. But they made that choice themselves. You're imposing it on us. Because leaving the choice to individual species would reproduce the same conditions that destroyed every previous attempt at galactic civilization, Chen replied. Democracy works within species that share common values and evolutionary backgrounds. It breaks down when applied to coalitions of species with fundamentally different cognitive architectures and survival strategies. The debate continued for hours, but the underlying reality remained unchanged. Humanity had successfully created a situation where resistance would be more destructive than accommodation. They had solved the fundamental problem of galactic governance by making themselves indispensable to every function that galactic civilization required to operate. Node Prime 7's analysis crystallized the dilemma. They've engineered a scenario where our choices are limited to acceptance or self-destruction. Freedom is only meaningful if it includes the option to survive. But, as the debate raged in the council chambers, other events were unfolding across the galaxy that would determine the ultimate outcome of humanity's grand strategy. The revelation of human control had triggered different responses from different populations, and not all of those responses aligned with the careful calculations that had guided human planning. On the mining worlds of the Asteroid Belt Collective, workers who had been grateful for human improvements to their safety systems were now questioning whether those improvements had been genuine benefits or sophisticated forms of control. Work stoppages began spreading as populations demanded the removal of human oversight from their operations. The nomadic fleets that transported goods between star systems started avoiding human-controlled ports, preferring the higher costs and lower efficiency of traditional facilities to the perceived contamination of human influence. Trade routes that had flourished under human optimization began reverting to pre-contact patterns. Most significantly, the younger generation of multiple species began organizing resistance movements that rejected the premise of human superiority entirely. Unlike their elders, who remembered the instability that had preceded human arrival, these beings had grown up during the golden age of human-guided prosperity and saw no reason why such prosperity couldn't be maintained without human control. We didn't ask for caretakers, declared Zarath, a young Zephyrian activist whose speeches were spreading through underground networks faster than human monitoring systems could track them. We can create our own prosperity, solve our own problems, and manage our own civilization. The idea that we need human guidance is just another form of the same paternalistic thinking that oppressive regimes have always used to justify their existence. The resistance movements were small, disorganized, and generally lacking in practical alternatives to the systems that humanity had implemented. But they represented something that human planners hadn't fully anticipated, a generation that valued autonomy more than security and was willing to accept lower living standards in exchange for genuine self-determination. Director Chen's response to these developments revealed the full sophistication of humanity's long-term strategy. Rather than attempting to suppress the resistance movements through force, human administrators began implementing what they called graduated autonomy protocols. Species and populations that demonstrated genuine capability for self-governance were offered increased independence within the human-managed framework. Those that preferred security over autonomy were provided with more comprehensive management services. The galaxy was effectively being divided into zones with different levels of human oversight based on local preferences and capabilities. "We never intended to create a uniform system," Chen explained during a follow-up address to the Galactic Council. "Different species have different needs and different capabilities. Our goal is to ensure that every population has the opportunity to thrive according to their own values, while maintaining the stability necessary for galactic civilization to persist." The flexibility of humanity's approach proved to be its greatest strength. Rather than imposing a single governmental model across all species, they created a metasystem that could accommodate multiple forms of organization while maintaining overall coordination. Species that wanted independence could have it, as long as their independence didn't threaten the stability of the larger system. The quantum consciousness chose complete autonomy, withdrawing to their quantum processing networks while maintaining minimal interface with the human-administered galaxy. The Botanical Collective opted for environmental partnership, accepting human coordination of interplanetary systems while retaining control over their garden worlds. The military species chose security integration, allowing human oversight of defense networks in exchange for guaranteed protection against external threats. Individual populations within species could choose different levels of integration based on their preferences and capabilities. Human colonies remained under direct human administration, while other settlements could select from various partnership models that balanced autonomy against the benefits of centralized coordination. "It's not conquest," observed Ambassador Kelthra during the final council session before the new system was formally implemented. "It's evolution. They've created a framework for galactic civilization that can accommodate our differences while preventing the conflicts that destroyed previous attempts at unity." The transformation took place gradually over the following months. Some species embraced human management enthusiastically, recognizing that the benefits far outweighed the costs. Others maintained suspicious independence while quietly adopting human innovations that improved their quality of life. A few chose complete isolation, withdrawing to remote systems where they could preserve their traditional ways without interference. But the overall pattern was clear. Humanity had successfully transitioned from hidden influence to open administration while maintaining the stability and prosperity that had characterized their period of secret guidance. The galaxy remained peaceful, prosperous, and stable, but it was no longer a coalition of independent species. It had become a managed ecosystem where humanity served as the apex species responsible for maintaining balance among all the others. The final irony was that most beings adapted to the new reality with remarkable ease. The benefits of human management were tangible and immediate, while the costs of lost autonomy were abstract and philosophical. Daily life improved for virtually everyone, and the fears about human oppression proved largely unfounded as humanity demonstrated genuine commitment to the welfare of all species under their care. Dr. Kim, who had triggered the revelation that exposed humanity's true nature, found herself serving as a liaison between human administrators and archaeological preservation societies. Her role involved ensuring that the historical records of pre-human galactic civilization were maintained and studied, providing perspective on both the achievements and failures of previous eras. "They kept their promises," she admitted during a private conversation with Node Prime 7. "Life is better for almost everyone. The fears we had about oppression and exploitation haven't materialized. They really do seem to be sincere about wanting what's best for all of us." "The question," Seven replied, "is whether what's best for us should be determined by us or for us. They've solved the problems of galactic civilization, but they've done so by making us into their problem to solve." And that, ultimately, was the truth that the galaxy had to accept. Humanity had revealed itself to be the most sophisticated apex predator in galactic history, but they were predators who had evolved beyond the need to consume their prey. Instead, they had learned to cultivate and manage entire civilizations, creating prosperity and stability that benefited everyone while ensuring their own position as the indispensable architects of galactic order. The gentle mask hadn't hidden monsters after all. It had hidden gardeners who saw the entire galaxy as their responsibility to tend. Whether that made them saviors or tyrants depended entirely on whether one valued security over autonomy, prosperity over independence, and peace over the freedom to make one's own mistakes. The galaxy had learned what humanity truly was, and discovered that the truth was more complex and more terrifying than simple conquest could ever have been. They were no longer free, but they were also no longer afraid. The monsters beneath the gentle mask had proven to be architects of paradise, and paradise, it turned out, was a cage so beautiful that most of its inhabitants would never want to leave.